Typically, in the early days of video games for the Nintendo Entertainment System, when the game loaded up to the title screen, you would be greeted with some happy and inviting music, or maybe some rather strong music to prepare you for your journey. Some games even chose to go with no music, and let the appearance of the title screen speak for itself. But Metroid did not choose to follow any of these. The way the game introduces itself is with one of the first steps as to how this game was somewhat revolutionary at the time of release. It's one thing to be seeing a desolate outer space planet and wondering what's about to take place, but the harsh and creepy music adds a definite element of fear that had never really been explored in video games before even beginning the game properly. However, if you do wait around a little bit, the title screen will shift to some text showing you what your mission is, why you're on this strange planet, and the music will go through a much softer passage that, to me, is written to build up mental strength for the player, about to take on a very dangerous task. Trust me, they're gonna need it. It's unexplained here, but you play as Samus, who is a bounty hunter on this mission. Now, upon beginning the game, we already run into the next revolutionary feature, and it's as simple as just going left. You are able to choose whether you go left or right from the beginning, after the epic fanfare of Samus appearing, of course. It's pretty nice design to have it available right at the beginning, since a very key upgrade is on the left, and most players would be drawn to going left first, as it was basically a new thing to see. Even so, you would very quickly hit a wall, literally, if you went right first, so that confirms that you need to go left from the start. Here, you pick up the Morph Ball, which allows Samus' suit to morph into a ball, so that you can roll under low ceilings or through tight gaps. And from this, so much more of this curious world is opened up to you. Metroid is a 2D side-scrolling exploration game, and it has become a very popular series. Many other unrelated games would also be styled in this way, with elements of exploration, and unique items scattered around the world to help you reach your goal. These games unrelated to the Metroid series would lovingly be called Metroidvanias, since this game here was where it all started. The format of the game and all the exploration was by far the most revolutionary part, and it inspired the popular modern Metroidvanias such as Axiom Verge and Hollow Knight, and it's very important to understand how revolutionary it was. But the problem here is this original Metroid game has aged like milk. That statement may be more harsh than it needs to be, but it does get the point across. It offers exploration, but the design of these places is pretty awful a lot of the time. It feels like the developers knew they wanted a big map, so they planned it out beforehand, but then copied and pasted rooms over and over, which can be seen particularly in Crateslayer. Not only that, but there's no map feature included in the game, so when all the rooms look the same and you get lost, just imagine trying to figure out where you are. I also feel that after the beginning exploration in the main area of Brinstar, the items were rather carelessly placed. But I will step back for a moment to give some credit for the beginning of the game. It's not just the Morph Ball that you should find at the beginning, but also other upgrades like the Long Beam to allow you to shoot further, or bombs to uncover hidden areas. You are also introduced to the two items that will appear several times throughout the game, the E-Tank to increase maximum energy, which functions as health, and the Missile Pack, which enables you to open doors that you cannot with the regular beam, and also serves as a stronger but limited weapon. And the designers did do a very good job of making sure that if you explore everywhere right from the beginning, you will run into all of these upgrades. Other than this, it feels like a map had just been randomly drawn out, without any thought of what would be in it, except for randomly placed items that seem very out of the way and sometimes are ridiculously hidden. For now, let's focus a little more on what you should be accomplishing as you explore the game. You start out in the main area of Brinstar with a now classic and rather empowering theme. Nothing too much can go wrong here as none of the enemies deal too much damage. And even if you do die, there isn't too much to go back through. The main setback is getting used to how the controls feel, and the clunky movement of Samus. It's a bit strange that her horizontal jumping speed is significantly slower than when she is running on the ground. The 4 major upgrades that you can get here in Brinstar after getting the Morph Ball at the beginning are the Long Beam, the Morph Ball Bombs, the Ice Beam, and the Varia Suit, where 2 of which are necessary to complete the game the intended way. From Brinstar there are 3 areas to go to, but the 3rd one can only be reached after clearing the first 2 bosses from the game. So instead of having all 3 options, you can choose to either use bombs to go to Crateslayer from near the beginning, or you can head to the bottom right of the map and head down into Norfair. I chose to go to Crateslayer first, so let's take a look at that now, and how I made a very bad decision indeed. The first thing you'll see when entering Crateslayer is that you're put in a long vertical room with several doors on both sides. The next thing you'll notice once you start going into the doors is that the enemies are now hurting you a lot. But perhaps the biggest problem is that whichever room you go into, all the rooms on the left look the same, and all the rooms on the right look the same. There are a number of problems with the area in general, but perhaps the biggest one is how all the rooms have just been copied and pasted, just like this section of the review, since I seem to have used that phrasing already when talking about this flaw. There's so much more to say about what was done wrong in this area though, just in the map layout alone. The first door on the right from entering leads to a rather large area where you will find absolutely nothing, except for a higher chance of death. Several identical rooms were placed at the top of the map without any items at all, not even extra missile packs. This is rather aggravating when, if we look later into the game, missile packs were clumped together rather than spaced out in these unused areas. In fact, after looking at an image of the map as a whole, thank you nesmaps.com, I have only seen 6 items throughout the entirety of Crateslayer, and trust me, there's a lot of Crateslayer. None of these items is a major upgrade either, just 4 missile packs and 2 E-tanks, although the latter can be very helpful given how much damage everything deals here. And again, keep in mind how much of this is identical, and that there is no map featured within the game, so getting lost is inevitable. When I went through this area, I was actually quite lucky to find the path to the boss rather quickly. However, there's a long detour that leads around to this door that involves falling through fake acid and taking a fall down through a long passage with many enemies called Rippers, which cannot be killed. And there's an even further detour from here that involves bombing a random spot on the ground which is completely unindicated, and then passing a fake crate. I don't get how these paths were meant to be discovered in the first place, but putting a decoy of the boss in is just straight up cruel. After all of that, let's finally move on to the real Kraid. He shoots a lot of stuff at you and takes a lot of hits before he goes down. He lags the game a lot. He killed me a lot. And then it hit me that I probably didn't have the skill to defeat him without more upgrades. So I had to leave the area and come back, which is sort of a big problem. It is typical of Metroidvanias to allow you to fight bosses in any order, but you should feel like you have a chance of defeating any boss that you can get to without major sequence breaks, and this is no sequence break at all. What I ended up doing was collecting the Varia Suit in Brinstar using an exploit, since you are not intended to reach it without visiting Norfair beforehand. Then I was able to go back to Kraid and basically spam attack him until he was dead. As a reward for beating Kraids, you get a whopping 75 extra missiles, which is admittedly rather satisfying. But here's the funny part. If you die after beating Kraid, you might be better off. Dying here skips the trek back through Kraid's lair, and puts you back at the elevator that brought you in. You'll keep all the progress you made, so it skips a lot, and makes that part a lot easier. The main catch is that you only come back with 30 health, which is very low, so you may want to either find an E-tank to refill all your health, or kill all the enemies you can to gain some health back bit by bit. Now that Kraid has been taken care of, it's time to go back through Brinstar and go to the next area, which is Norfair. Norfair is pretty darn huge, and there's quite a few major upgrades here. The high jump boots, the screw attack, the wave beam, and another ice beam. None of these are actually necessary to beat the game, but they're all quality of life upgrades except for the wave beam. This beam does give you the power to shoot through walls, but it is weaker than the ice beam. It is also impossible to kill the main enemy of the final area without the ice beam, which is why 2 ice beams were put into the game, but it was not mentioned anywhere within the game that it is crucial. Similarly to Crateslayer, navigation can be an issue in Norfair since there are a lot of identical rooms. But there's some added difficulty thanks to how huge the area is, as well as many more hidden paths through walls and ceilings that you can't even see. But I suppose mostly that rant's already been had, and the path through to Ridley's hideout isn't too complicated, so that's a positive. There's just a lot to explore in the way, which does make it very easy to get lost, but as a whole I'd say it's done much better than Crateslayer, since almost every end will have an item for you to collect. Although most of these will be missile packs, as there is only one E-tank in the entire area. In quite a large contrast to Crateslayer, the top right of this map is filled with missile pack after missile pack after missile pack, sometimes very literally.
Two packs of missile. Cool game. Very cool. 3 packs of missile.
Ridley's hideout is entered from the bottom of Norfair, similarly to how Crateslayer was entered from the bottom of Brinstar. So, as a quick note, I really like how the boss areas are located at what we can assume to be closer to the middle of the planet. Both Crade and Ridley are also near to the bottom of their areas, which is again a nice touch. Compared to the other areas already covered, Ridley's hideout is relatively small, but there is also much more variety between the different rooms that you'll come across. Due to these factors, it is perhaps the easiest non-linear area to navigate. There aren't too many notable stops on the way, as there are no major upgrades here. In fact, there are only 5 items throughout the entire area. There's a rather well-known E-tank that looks like it's just waiting there ready to be taken in a hallway, but the floor in front is actually fake, so instead you need to make a well-timed jump to reach it. But other than that, there's nothing much else to say. Ridley's so small and cute and easy to beat. I hope he stays that way when he inevitably comes back from the dead for later games in the series. Now that both Crade and Ridley have been defeated, a previous dead end at the top of Brinstar opens up. There are statues of Crade and Ridley in this room as a nice touch, but possibly to hint that you need to defeat them before going in here. You might want to explore a little more before going in here, since it's the last area and you can lose a lot of health in here. For example, perhaps you haven't found all of the E-tanks to give you the maximum health possible. There are 8 of these tanks to find, although for whatever reason you are limited to only 6. I was heading into Torian with only 5 of these, and since I was playing on the Switch Retro library, I wanted to make a save state before entering, in case I found it a bit too difficult, and wanted to grab an extra E-tank just for safety. That was when I accidentally reloaded a save state from before I had defeated either of the previous bosses.
I'm gonna do this. I am going to die because I meant to create one.
Thankfully, a speedrunner by the name of CHX42 was in my stream chat, and he was able to help me use some passwords to restore everything I had. But we did have some issues. So some of the footage that you will see in the final area, Torian, will be provided by CHX42. And seriously, go check him out. He does some insane things when playing this game fast, and holds multiple world records across various categories. There are also a couple of other things to address before talking about this final area. First, the password system that this game uses. Whenever you take a death in this game, the game will show you a password that you can note down somewhere. There is no feature in the game to save your progress, but instead there are 2 options from the title screen, either to start the game or enter a password. The password brings you back to the area that you had just been in, with all of the items that you had previously found. Another thing that needs to be mentioned is the drops you get from enemies. After you kill any enemy you run into, they have a chance to drop either health or some spare missiles, and you can pick these up to use for yourself. Specific enemies should always give one of these drops, but there are some enemies that might not drop anything. The main enemy of the final area is supposed to drop something every time. So, let's finally talk about Torian. The music that plays in this area is actually the same music that is used when fighting the previous two bosses, Kraid and Ridley. We also run into a lot of scary looking enemies, and they're called Metroids. Finally, we've found what the game is named after. They will latch onto you and slowly drain your health, and if you do get caught by them, you can only escape from rolling into the morph ball and placing a well-timed bomb. To defeat the Metroids, they need to be frozen with the ice beam and then shot with 5 missiles. So basically, if you came here without the ice beam, don't expect to make it through alive. As I mentioned earlier, it was not mentioned anywhere in the game that the ice beam was needed to defeat the evil Metroids that you had been ordered to kill at the beginning of the game. Torian is also the only linear area of the game, so at the very least you won't get lost. I suppose the designers must finally have thought that the enemies were tricky enough on their own, and especially here when the Metroids are strewn across every room leading up to the end. You can also endlessly reload Metroids after killing them, however, which is actually very useful if you find a situation where they are unlikely to get to you. And as I previously mentioned, Metroids are supposed to drop either health or missiles every time they are killed. It's extremely important to have a high missile count for the end of this area, as you will soon discover once you get there. So it would of course be a sensible idea to grind for missiles and health before, which should be easy with the Metroids. But not if you've used a dodgy password. Even though I had used a password that gave me the same upgrades I already had, it did something very strange. Quite often the Metroids would not drop anything, so for some reason passwords break other features within the game, and as a result the grind did not work for me, and I did not gather footage of my own that beat the game. I have beaten the game before though, I promise. After traversing numerous rooms filled with Metroids, the music will suddenly shift to a low-pitched trill, and you'll find yourself in a very mechanical looking room. There's a lot of gas randomly shooting out of the pipes, and you need to break through some strange barriers which gradually shrink as you shoot them with missiles, but grow again if you're too slow to shoot them down. At the end of the room above a pit of acid, there she is, the Mother Brain. She doesn't attack you, but she takes a lot of missiles to go down, and there are enough attacks coming from the gas and other strange rings forming and heading straight for you, which are called Rinkas. It's a very scary and intense battle, if you can call it that, because of the precision you need in order to stay safe. But eventually Mother Brain goes down, and with some very rapid bright flashes, not too pleasing on the eyes and a potential seizure hazard. So you're all done. Except, no, she's set a time bomb and you need to escape. The escape sequence is extremely repetitive, and can be easy to make mistakes on if you're feeling under pressure, although the timer counts down from 999, so you actually have a lot of time. A little bit anticlimactic, even though it was a good idea for a plot twist. And now you really are done, and you get a great victory theme, which is actually a little reminiscent of the title theme, but significantly less spooky for the most part. You get a different view of Samus depending on how long you spend on the game, including the famous bikini ending for doing it all in under an hour. That was a lot to go through. There was a lot of charm, but there are so many flaws that definitely can't be ignored. Revolutionary as it may have been, it's very hard to see the appeal in the current day since it hasn't aged well at all, and doesn't feel accessible. Therefore, my final score for Metroid will be 5.3 out of 10. My view of this game is that you really shouldn't play it. For a much better experience of this same game, play Metroid Zero Mission, as it is a remake of the first Metroid game, and is more beginner friendly, while still difficult to master. There's a lot of added content, better upgrades, boss fights, you name it. It was made for the Game Boy Advance and can of course also be played on the Wii U Virtual Console. Tell me, do you agree with the points I've made? I tried a different approach with this review, and I know I won't be able to do this for every game, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. So, what rating would you give Metroid for the NES released in 1986? As ever, thank you for watching, and please continue to be your own unique self.